Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Big job numbers. 372,000 jobs created in the month of June. Extending that streak of strong job growth. And again, you got, it's the Biden inflation, the Biden economy is terrible, but creating jobs. In fact, this is one of those moments now have surpassed pre-pandemic levels of employment. So for the Mitch McConnells of the world and all of the conservatives going, oh, no. That nobody wants to work. Yeah, nobody wants to work for the crummy wages pre-pandemic. Nobody wants to work for poverty wages and desperate conditions. People want better opportunities because, hey, came through the pandemic being told, hey, we're heroes, we're essential, frontline heroes. And then, back to being peons. No, I think people are fed up. Nope, not going to happen. And that be a little more choosy. And I think that's a good thing. Because you know where some of the big victories are happening in this country? Some of the good stuff's happening in the workplace, where workers are saying, you know what, we're going to organize, we're going to stand together, we're going to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, and that word that Joe Biden used this week, dignity. Big one. I think that's a big one. It's something Democrats, it's got to be in your wheelhouse. But 372,000 jobs added. 381,000 in the private sector. And again, this is one of those things where you go, for all the good news coming out of the job numbers, Republicans still doing a very good job of hammering the public sector as, again, total employment in the public sector down. Because, hey, we've got to crush that. 599,000 jobs in local government have been lost since the pandemic. Those are services and things that we, the people, expect, things that we've needed, not going to be done. And that works into the hands of our conservative friends because, hey, government can't and shouldn't do anything. So when you call and you go, hey, I need help, there's nobody there. That's a win for them. But the thing is, with the job growth, good stuff. Manufacturing saw 29,000 additional jobs. It's not what I'd love to see more, but it's a step in the direction. Construction added 13,000 jobs in June, again, above pre-pandemic levels. Same thing with manufacturing, above pre-pandemic levels. Air transportation, retail, all above pre-pandemic levels. We're adding jobs. Now, here's the thing. This is where I come back to the main point that I talk about all the time. Bargaining power. Workers having the bargaining power to demand better wages, hours, conditions, because corporate America doing very well. Thank you very much. Profits up, profits good. CEOs lining their pockets, shareholders, they're doing all right too. But the people who create the wealth, the people who actually do the work, not so much. And this is where I say collective bargaining. I say joining unions. I say being able to sit down and negotiate for those better wages, hours, conditions. Oh, that dignity. That's where we need to be moving. And thank goodness Joe Biden is pushing to ensure that our government encourages people to join and form unions. Because the polling data that's out there, overwhelmingly people want it. And we need to streamline it so people can do this. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours. Got a lot to get to today. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. The big announcement today, the president signed an executive order ensuring that women have access to abortion services. Again, I don't know how much this is going to matter in states that are hell-bent, like Louisiana, of making it completely illegal. I'm sure there are going to be a flurry of court challenges that will end up, before the six in robes who have decided that this is where we're going to be. But I found it interesting that the White House made a specific warning for women who use these menstrual cycle tracking apps. evidently, and again, this is that privacy thing. Evidently, the fear is that as you put your personal information into these apps that are, out there, the bounty hunters who are looking to make profit, who are looking to turn women in, turn them into criminals, this could be one of the tools that they use. So, going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Again, I'm good on Biden for using the tool that he has, because it's the only tool that they have at this moment, because we can't seem to pass anything, and we do need to get something passed into law. But had to do it. Also today, Cipollone is his name. Pat Cipollone, the former White House counsel to Donald Trump, testified for, they're saying, over 8 hours. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if you've ever been questioned for 8 hours. I don't know. I don't know how long you could be questioned for 8 hours. I don't know how long that goes without you talking and saying a lot of stuff. Now Zoe Lofgren, the congresswoman from California, she came out and said, "Look, he talked, he spoke, he testified, he was forthcoming, he did it voluntarily. He did not contradict any of the previous testimony." Now, she said, not contradicting is not the same as confirming, but did not push back on anything that Cassidy Hutchinson had brought up in her testimony, which I think is kind of a big deal. So in 8 hours of him talking, because I got to tell you, if you got to sit and think of questions for somebody for 8 hours, somebody's doing a lot of ratchet jawing. There was a lot of explaining here. Going to be interesting to see what comes out in the hearings going forward, which I understand next Tuesday going to be one. Also going to be a primetime one, possibly Thursday coming up. So good stuff. Good stuff. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line one. Alice, how are we doing today?
Oh, we're doing. What I was going to say is, we can have these hearings, but unless we have an absolute action done, nothing's going to change, because most of us who have common sense, we're surprised about some of the stuff that's coming out, but we're not shocked, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
I mean, we're like, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. But the ones that need to be hearing and get their eyes wide open and open their ears, they don't believe it anyways.
Yeah, see, I'm not worried about them, Alice. The fives I'm not worried about. We're never getting them. You're never getting the true believer. The 33%, the 35% of true believers, the ones who mainline the Kool-Aid, the ones who've got the IV, they bought the shirt and the flag, they've got all the paraphernalia. You're never reaching them. I'm looking for that 5 to 10% of the least active, least informed, least active, who decide every one of our elections, the people who pay almost no attention to anything. They're the ones who swing this country one way or the other. And those are the people that I think really need to be paying attention to this, because this means them.
Well, but where I was going with this, because I agree with you on the lunatics, that's not going to happen. But, like, Merrick Garland, Congress, these are the people that we need to take action to do something about this. And so far, what are we going to do? Wait until the clock runs out and goes, can't do nothing now. My hands are tied.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, I'm frustrated at the pace of this, and I have been frustrated for a long time. But as these hearings roll out, they are so well done. There's so much information here that I'm at a point to where Merrick Garland is probably sitting back waiting for it to finish up, and making sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. Because look, at the end of the day, if you're going to come for the king, if you're going to go for the top of the hill, you better have everything in line. You better have your ducks in a row, because you better not miss. that's just where my mind is. And the fact that we're not getting a lot of leaks out of the DOJ, the fact that things are quiet, I'm still guardedly optimistic. Do I think anything is going to happen to Trump? No, I still don't. But there's still a possibility, I think. I'm guardedly optimistic.
Right. Well, I keep hoping because, like you, I don't think anything's going to happen to him. But I keep just waiting, thinking, it'd be a shame if somebody got COVID and died from it. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but that's the point I'm at.
Yeah.
And
well,
I'm referring to him.
You're better than that, Alice. You're better than that.
Oh, I don't know. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, or whoever. But you have a good evening.
Good stuff. Thank you, Alice. I appreciate it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Going to take a quick break. Back on the other side. Look, I want Donald Trump to live a very long life. I would prefer it to be while him being orange in an orange jumpsuit at the Gray Bar Hotel, maybe in Georgia. Maybe that's going to happen. Considering all the stuff coming out of Georgia, that could be a possibility. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Oh boy, the right-wing blogosphere losing their mind over Brett Kavanaugh not being able to finish his dessert. Very angry that the Supreme Court justice had to bail through the kitchen to go through the back alley, aborting his dessert. Evidently, the Supreme Court justice was having dinner at Morton's Steakhouse, very fancy steakhouse. And some folks said, hey, there's that guy who's taking women's rights away. Maybe we should protest. And they went outside and in a peaceful, very peaceful way, began protesting. And asked the manager to throw the bum out. They did not. Kavanaugh left through the back door, ran out through the alley, and disappeared. Now, Morton's Steakhouse, they put out a statement that I find very interesting. They wrote, the Honorable Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh and all of our other patrons at the restaurant were unduly harassed by unruly protesters while eating at our Morton's restaurant. Politics, regardless of your side or view, should not be trample the freedom at play of the right to congregate and eat dinner. There is a time and a place for everything. Disturbing the dinner of all of our customers was an act of selfishness and void of decency. Again, my first response, and this is an FCC regulated program, is what the are you talking about? Now, understand, we're in a place, we're in a world that's moving towards very radical changes that are being thrust on us by people like Kavanaugh. And I'm sorry, Brett. I'm sorry if you had to leave through the back door of your fancy restaurant and walk through the alley where your decisions are going to force poor and working class women to go to seek the help that they want and need. I'm sorry. Sorry that you had to see that alley that people are going to die in. I'm sorry. Sorry for that. Sorry that you had to abort your dessert. But here's the thing. And this is what's driving me crazy, because the Mortons people are like, we have the right to dinner. We have the right to privacy. You know what? Brett Kavanaugh lost his right to privacy. He lost his right to privacy the second that he decided, the second that he voted against my daughter's right to privacy, the second he voted against every woman's right to privacy, he's lost his. Sorry, that's how this goes. You don't get to make radical changes. You don't get to do this kind of stuff and go, oh, no harm, no foul. Sorry, Brett. That's just not how it goes. And get ready because this is the world that we're moving towards. This is what direct action looks like. And this, my friends, this is what the right has been doing for years. This is what they've been doing for decades, that the left is just kind of, oh, it's their right to protest. If you've ever gone to an abortion clinic, and this is going back to my days in college, where they would set up blockades of people harassing women who were trying to go in. They'd have to walk the gauntlet. And most of the people going into these Planned Parenthoods or these preterms or whatever the names of these clinics were, most of them were birth control. They were there for checkups. They were there for STD exams. They were there for all kinds of other things. And they'd still have to run the gauntlet of these zealots. And the shame and the harassment and the intimidation. And, well, that's their right to free speech. And you don't hear one of these crazy right-wingers saying anything about that. No. But dessert, oh my gosh. The creme brulee is going to get cold. Brett's not going to be able to see the flames as our democracy burns. But here's the thing. The right wing has been using these direct action tactics for years. They've been threatening us, blowing up clinics. They've been threatening us in front of clinics. The Tea Party, how many people remember the idiot from my neck of the woods here, just down the road in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, when attacked Arlen Specter? Get your government hands off my Medicare. Wanting to go to blows with a senator at a town hall. These Proud Boy idiots, these bullies, going after freaking librarians. They've been doing this stuff for decades because they understand direct action works, especially when you throw in the bullying and the intimidation and the threats. Now, at no point was Brett Kavanaugh threatened. At no point did anyone intimidate him other than the people's mere presence. The presence of people standing there saying they disagree with his decision and that they're angry with his decision. Somehow, I guess, to a conservative, that can be threatening and bullying. That someone doesn't agree with their narrow-minded decisions. Somehow, our snowflakes on the right, somehow this is a bridge too far. And the frustrating part of this is, Democrats, liberals, good, decent, honest Americans had better come around to the idea that this is where we're going to have to fight these wars again. We're going to have to fight the battles of our grandparents' generation. We're going to have to get back in the streets. We're going to have to engage in direct action again because our country is being taken away, systematically dismantled by conservative activist judges. Yes. And it's always amazing to me that the rhetoric that the right has used to point their finger at the left is exactly the tactics that they have been employing for decades. It's one of those things where you tell me what you think I'm doing, and now I know what you're doing. And so today I was thinking back to a conversation I had election night 2016. A very conservative acquaintance I was standing with. We were talking at an election watch party. And as it was becoming clear that there's a possibility Trump was going to win. And I had predicted Trump was going to win in April of 16 because, my grandmother had passed away and I went back to Cleveland for the funeral. And, my family, who was never political, never bothered to vote, never complained, but never did anything about it. They were all registering to vote, and they were all, enthusiastically voting for Trump for a bunch of reasons. One, they wanted their industrial base back. They wanted those union jobs back. They wanted that the manufacturing prowess of Cleveland back. But also throw in there the hatred, the racism, the misogyny, the homophobia, all that other stuff. But it was more, it was the economy, stupid. And I said, he's going to win because of that sales job. But as it was becoming clear that Trump was going to win, our conversation changed from the past and the election to what the future was going to be and what the strategies each side were going to employ, what the lessons were going to be. But there was one statement that this guy made, almost prophetic. He said it's going to be interesting watching liberals turn into states' rights activists, because liberals had always been, hey, we need to take over the federal government, and we need a level playing field for everyone, and they've neglected the states. Republicans have bore into the states. They control more state houses. They control more governor mansions. They've really drilled down to the local. And he was, again, very prophetic. He's like, it's going to be interesting watching them fight on the state, as Trump is going to try and federalize things and use the federal government as a bludgeon. And that's what they've done. And that's what this Supreme Court is going to do. And now that 2016 statement is now even more clairvoyant, because this is where the battles are. And this is where the direct action has to come. We've got to start going after state representatives who propose, hey, let's take away, certification for teachers and substitute teachers, so we can get ideologues in to spy on teachers. Hey, let's ban all access to abortive care. Hey, let's go after, you name the right-wing ideological fantasy. It's time for people to start getting engaged, not just on national level politics, but in local elections. It's great that we get all fired up about the presidential. It's great we get fired up about Senate races, and we spend all kinds of money on those. But you know what? The person who's your county commissioner, the person who's your town mayor, the person who's your state rep, those are the folks who really affect your day-to-day lives. And this is where the organizing really has to begin and really has to kick in, and we really have to bore down. Because guess what? We're like 50 years behind. The American Legislative Exchange Council has been doing the homework of state reps for decades. There's nothing on the other side. And this is a failure, yes, of the Democratic Party. This is a failure of Democratic voters. This is a failure of us. It's time to dust ourselves off, stand up, and begin to fight back. And it's in the streets. And it's taking on bullies. And it's taking on people who do this kind of stuff. So do I condone going and making Brett Kavanaugh uncomfortable? You're damn right I do. No violence. Absolutely not. But let your thoughts known? Absolutely. No dessert for you, Brett, ever. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1939. That was the day AFL President William Greene called all affiliates to meet in Chicago. Greene sought to mobilize union leaders in a fight to restore prevailing wages on federal relief projects. Building tradesmen on WPA construction sites had started walking off the job in spontaneous strikes across the country 3 days earlier. The strike spread rapidly to 36 states, quickly turning into a nationwide walkout of over 150,000. Workers were outraged by provisions in the latest federal relief bill titled the Woodrum Act. New terms established the 130-hour rule, essentially slashing wages by more than half. It also called for a 30-day dismissal of all workers who had been on WPA rolls for 18 months. The AFL Building Trades Department stated the act would, quote, destroy national wage standards established through 50 years of collective bargaining. IBEW leader Daniel Tracy added that forcing a lower wage on federal relief workers would only aid building contractors in private industry to do the same. From St. Louis to Rochester, from Minneapolis to Akron, picket lines were solid. Organizers worked to build solidarity among unskilled WPA workers affected by the new starvation bill. Tens of thousands of strikers were fired in WPA-ordered dismissals. President Roosevelt declared there could be no strikes against the federal government. Attorney General Frank Murphy, former Michigan governor during the Flint sit-down strike, declared that striking against the government would build a fascist psychology. WPA administrators also threatened organizers with federal prosecution, fines, and jail time. But New York's Building and Construction Trades Council leader Thomas Murray authorized a strike of 32,000. He avowed this will be a strike to the finish.
It's a serious handicap for an elected leader to be a lame duck. Far worse, though, if the leader is just plain lame. Poor Joe Biden has tumbled into both ditches. He set himself up for lame duckism in the 2020 race by promising voters that he would merely be, quote, a bridge, not anything else. He portrayed himself as a bipartisan inside player, an interim senior statesman who would calmly pilot the ship of state from Trump's bombast to whomever was next. But just a year and a half into his presidency, the duckism has kicked in, and he's scrambling to insist that he's still the president, now planning to run again in 2024. But that only highlights Biden's inherent lameness. He's playing president rather than being one. Take his embarrassingly meek response to the Supreme Court's 6 partisan extremists who just nullified the fundamental freedom of all women in America to control their own bodies. Biden called the court's dictate terrible. But what did he do? His first, quote, action was to send out a fundraising mailing asking for $15 donations to re-elect Democrats. Then he flew off on a 4-day trip abroad. Roundly condemned for being AWOL, he belatedly held a press conference in Spain, calling the court's attack on women, quote, destabilizing. Gosh, Joe, so harsh. Then he called on Congress to do something. But wait, aren't you the president? Shouldn't you at least be here, show up on the front lines, and treat this as the democracy emergency it is? Hello, 6 besotted judicial right-wingers who think their black robes make them little gods have just sanctimoniously usurped an innate human right. This is Jim Hightower saying, the 70% of Americans who oppose the ungodly arrogance of these 6 judges need a real president, one who will fight like hell to restore this right. And the question they have is, where is Joe?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news. Gonna have some good news. It appears that the House Armed Services Committee has put in the Defense Authorization Act, this Enablers Act, going to go after the Russian oligarchs and how they're hiding their dirty money here in the U.S. You may remember those Pandora Papers. For about 16 seconds was all the news. People were talking about, oh, they're hiding money in offshore accounts, like in Delaware. Hey, we should maybe follow the money. There was that. And then all of a sudden, it was gone. Because, hey, South Dakota, Delaware, it turns out we're doing it too. This could be something helpful to hunt down the Russian oligarch money, the dirty money, and, well, stop. This could be a good thing. And here to explain exactly what it is and help walk me through it, I've asked Scott Greatech to come talk with us. Scott is the Director of Advocacy for Transparency International, their website, us.transparency.org. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be with you, Rick.
So, Enablers Act. Explain to me what the Enablers Act is and what it would do.
Very exciting. So, this is a bipartisan bill that would essentially make it much harder for corrupt Russian leaders, other corrupt officials from around the world to take money that they're stealing from their own people and to move it into the United States. For decades now, we've had rules for our financial institutions, for our banks, that if they open an account for somebody, if they have a new customer, that they have to do some basic due diligence checks on who those folks are. If they're opening an account for a corporate entity, an LLC or partnership, they have to find out who the actual or beneficial owners of that company are. They have to do some background checks on them to make sure that they're not under, say, U.S. sanctions, or that they're not, felons on the lam. These are simple requirements that banks have had on the books for decades. Unfortunately, that means the bad guys who want to take this dirty money and get it into the United States financial system have found other, more creative ways to get around the banks. So what they've done instead is they've turned to these intermediaries, these professional middlemen, or what we call the enablers of corruption. These are folks who form corporations. These are folks who form trusts. These are lawyers or accountants who provide financial services for their clients. These are folks who manage and move money. And basically, they are the new conduits for this dirty money coming into the United States. The Pandora Papers really blew the roof off this phenomenon. It showed, for example, that there were 30 US-based trusts that were tied to human folks who were, allegations of human rights abuses, labor abuses, environmental crimes, bribery, and this money was living in the United States and had been formed by trust formation agents who were not doing these sorts of due diligence checks on their clients.
Yeah.
That means if you're a bad guy in different parts of the world, you want to move your dirty money to the United States, you basically have a roadmap for how to do that.
Yeah. So, by enablers, you mean criminals? How much money are we talking about here? I mean, I've heard all over the map. How much money are we talking about in these trusts and these accounts?
So the Pandora Papers found, in the United States alone, there were a series of trusts across 15 states that were holding over $1 billion in assets. But as far as how much dirty money is circulating the globe, very difficult to tell. I've heard estimations in the trillions of dollars, into the tens of trillions of dollars. Illicit financial flows are essentially keeping countries in Africa as net creditors to the world. This is a huge amount of money that is being siphoning off with the complicity of folks in the West, including in the United States, to the detriment of already extremely vulnerable poor countries around the world.
So now this Enablers Act, if passed, because it's passed the House, I understand it's part of the Defense Authorization Act. It's got to go to the Senate, and everything goes to die in the Senate. Maybe not this. We'll see, because it is part of the Defense Authorization Act. Walk me through how this would crack down and what that would mean, going forward. I mean, these criminals are going to try and find other ways. Obviously, it's like whack-a-mole. But walk me through what that would look like.
Right. So this law tries to plug all of those loopholes that are available to these criminals. So what it does, and by the way, it's been added to the defense bill. That's going to be voted on in the House in the next couple of weeks. We think it stands a really good chance of passing, being kept in the House defense bill. Then that goes to the Senate. They have to pass their own version of the bill, and then they conference it out. They negotiate what's in and what's out. So we'll know in the next few months whether this law becomes part of the final defense bill. We're thinking it's got a really good shot. We're certainly pushing for it too. Basically, what Enablers would do is it would say to this class of gatekeepers to the U.S. financial system, again, these are the lawyers, the accountants, the investment advisors, the folks who form or register companies in the United States. When you have a client walk into your door, you can't just take their money, form a company, form a trust, provide certain services for them without first asking some very basic questions. And the law gives the Treasury Department, who's going to be responsible for implementing this, they give it some options about which types of enablers pose the biggest risk and therefore should have the greatest amount of anti-money laundering requirements. But at the very least, they could say, if you walk in and you're a company, who are the actual beneficial owners of that company? There was a corporate formation agent, somebody who incorporated a company in Delaware. That company is now linked to one of Vladimir Putin's closest allies, and it holds a $14 million property in Washington, D.C. Another company formed in Delaware by a U.S. formation agent is linked to a multi-million-dollar property in New York City. There was some American professional service provider who did those things. We're saying if somebody walks in your door and asks to move this amount of money for you to form a corporation, you have to at the least ask, who are the actual owners behind it? If there's a greater risk that these folks could be used to launder money into the United States, they should also have to do some basic due diligence checks on this person. Run their name through a Google search, run their names through sanctions lists to see if they're under sanctions currently. They could set up anti-money laundering programs within those firms if they're larger firms that have greater risk. There's a whole host of options. If you find out, for example, that a client you're working with is engaged in suspicious activity, moving vast amounts of money from certain countries in the world, and maybe they were a former high-level political appointee of a government in that country, and they're moving amounts of money with all strange rounded zeros, then you can file a suspicious activity report or a SAR, just the way that banks do now. Those go to the federal government. They can review that financial activity and determine whether or not there may be money laundering or other crimes underneath it.
Yeah, it sounds great. So what are the chances of it actually passing the Senate? Because again, like I said a moment ago, the Senate seems to be where all good ideas go to die.
I think there are a lot of folks right now who are a bit frustrated that we haven't been able to find more of the dirty money that, in particular, corrupt Russian leaders have been able to bring into the United States. And there's a few reasons that it's hard to find that money. We have an under-resourced financial crimes investment agency known as FinCEN. We have still anonymous shell companies that these corrupt and oligarchs in Russia are able to hide their money through. But we also just don't have these simple safeguards. So we don't have folks raising the flag, flagging dirty money, and sending that to law enforcement who can do something about it. We think that because there's so much attention right now on trying to find and prevent this Russian dirty money from making its way into the United States, that there's going to be strong bipartisan interest behind this. We already know, we're talking about the defense bill. The Biden administration has made the fight against foreign corruption a top national security priority. They have actually put out a strategy that talks about this problem, talks about the gatekeepers to the US financial system, talks about there being holes in our regulatory system that are being taken advantage of. They are in support of these reforms writ large. We think this is the vehicle to do it. It's already got bipartisan support. It's already in the defense bill. We just have to make sure that folks understand the gravity and the urgency of the problem this is trying to address, and that we're able to keep it in there over the finish line.
Yeah, you got to do something. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Graytech, Director of Advocacy at Transparency International. Their website, us.transparency.org. We'll get links out on social media, talking a little bit about the Enablers Act, now part of the Defense Authorization Act, passed by the House. This is because of what's going on in Ukraine and with Russia's, all that nonsense. You're seeing the oligarch. They're trying to find places to park their money, aren't they? I mean, especially as the U.S. is cracking down and seizing their boats and seizing their assets. This should be a moment where there should be massive bipartisan support. But sadly, I'm hoping I'm wrong, but this should be one of those moments where, as a country, this could be one of those things that unites us around, hey, we should be going after oligarchs who are making money off the backs of poor working people and stealing resources from communities. This sounds like something we could rally around. At least I think.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And there's been a lot of agreement so far. I mean, this bill was introduced with strong bipartisan support, bringing folks together who don't typically work on legislation together. This is something that can have the support of law enforcement around the country. Keep in mind that if your county sheriff, your local district attorney, police chiefs, if they had access to a database that said, in your county, in your state, there have been flagged questionable financial activity, and they were able to see that linked to these law firms, linked to these accounting firms, linked to these corporate formation firms, that there is dirty money moving through them. This gives law enforcement powerful tools to go after those folks and disrupt criminal enterprises. Keep in mind, this isn't just about following corrupt money. That's obviously what Transparency International is committed to doing. But this kind of oversight and this kind of intelligence for law enforcement can be used to go after drug cartels who are moving dirty money into the United States. This goes after human traffickers who are financing their operations through illicit financial flows. This can go after human rights abusers, or those who are destroying the environment and moving the money and the proceeds of that into the United States. It has a whole host of cascading effects. That's why I think it's got such broad bipartisan support and potential, especially in this moment, especially as we're looking for responses to the crisis in Ukraine. Here is something we can do to not only better that situation by depriving Russia of an ability to move their dirty money and grow it in the United States through their corrupt officials, but we're also helping to protect the integrity of our own financial system and being able to make sure that that dirty money doesn't find a home here and bring with it other types of criminal activity. So I think it's got a great opportunity to thread the needle.
No, this is great, but it sounds to me like this is Russia focused. This is Russian oligarch focused. Are we talking Chinese? Are we talking others? Are we talking American oligarchs? Are we talking the people who are, because one of the things the Panama Papers did point out is, rich people are hiding their money all over the place to avoid paying taxes, to avoid, helping society. This is one of these moments where I would love to see us go after these people who have shirked their responsibility to society and really hammer after them for evading. Look, they got Al Capone for tax evasion. This is one of those things where I don't care your nationality. We should be going after you if you're screwing over the American taxpayer.
I think there's a heightened sense of urgency and immediacy behind this because we have seen the importance and the value of finding and seizing assets that can be linked to corrupt Russian officials. That's certainly put a focus on it. We've come to understand in the last few months the importance of the Russian government being able to finance and sustain itself by taking money that it has literally stolen from its own people. My organization estimates that to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Taking that money, and they know they can't keep it inside Russia because folks may find out about it. It's able to be seized if it's kept within their borders. And frankly, they want to make a good investment on it. So that's when they come to see the value of Western countries. They move it into Western countries in Europe and in the United States in order to hide it and in order to grow it. And it's that earned income, if you will, that investment income that they get from being able to park it in Western nations that then goes back to be able to bolster and sustain those regimes like that in Russia. Yeah. So we've come to understand the interconnectedness of this, I think, since the invasion of Ukraine. And from that, there's been a real opportunity to say, if you follow the money and you cut off the sources of money and you surface that criminal money, that you can make a real impact further down the line and be able to bring some much needed transparency to otherwise a system that has helped enable not only crime here in the United States, but obviously military aggression in Eastern Europe.
No, and because I'm thinking, Russian mafia kind of stuff. I have a friend who lives in Florida who says basically all of South Florida has been bought up by Russian oligarchs using the kind of dark money that you're talking about. Because that's where they parked most of this money, and they went through real estate transactions where you could buy things up for cash. Is this part of what you're talking about in this as well? This kind of a situation?
So I'll note that one of the lead sponsors of this bill is actually Representative Maria Salazar out of Miami. I think she's been able to understand the particular importance of this in her home district. But real estate has long been a go-to vehicle for corrupt foreign officials and other criminals to try and move and hide their money inside the United States. And our response so far has been pretty much incomplete. We have a program that says for about a dozen metropolitan areas around the country, there's a requirement for folks to flag suspicious transactions basically above a certain dollar threshold for certain types of real estate purchases. But that means that the folks who are really intent on moving their money into the United States are just going to other parts of the country. We saw this, and we talked about this before, Rick, happening in my hometown of Cleveland. An oligarch was able to take stolen money out of Eastern Europe and move it into Cleveland, buying up commercial property right in the downtown of the city, buying up steel mills. And of course, when things are propped up and financed from stolen money, from criminal proceeds, when they ended up collapsing, and of course they did, the steel mill went out of business, dozens of people lost their jobs, allegations of labor violations and environmental violations, et cetera, then we see why having that sort of incomplete point-by-point, city-by-city system is not enough. Yeah. And so fortunately, last year, the Biden administration announced that they were going to adopt a new rule to really try and crack down on money laundering and real estate. And we are hoping that that rule will cover the entire country. It will make sure that there are no longer any geographical loopholes for these corrupt officials and other criminals to be able to move their money inside the United States.
Oh, good stuff. Last question. What can we do to help? What can people do? Anything?
If you have the time and the capacity, go to our website, us.transparency.org. Educate yourself on the Enablers Act. We have fact sheets up there. We have letters that you can look into more of the details here, and then just reach out to your member of Congress. Reach out to local law enforcement in your community and tell them that you want to give them the resources to be able to crack down on these types of crimes. Call up your senator, call up your representative, write to them, tell them that this is a way that can not only benefit the national security of the United States by being able to keep this dirty money out of our country, but can also help protect our local communities by keeping out drug cartels, disrupting criminal enterprises, and obviously making sure that the United States and our local financial systems, including real estate in the neighborhoods that we live on, don't turn into repositories for dirty money finance from folks around the world.
Good stuff, Scott. I appreciate the time, the information. I'm looking forward to seeing the Senate pass this and Joe Biden putting his Joe Biden on this.
Me too, Rick. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Good stuff, Scott. I appreciate the time. Scott Graytek, Director of Advocacy there at Transparency International, us.transparency.org, the website. Make sure you check that out. We'll get links out on social media. Gonna take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1966. That was the day that the International Association of Machinists went out on strike. The day before, the Machinists newsletter, published out of Washington, D.C., declared strike set on 5 airlines. During the first half of the 1960s, the airline industry had invested in new equipment and jet technology. Now those investments were paying off in huge profits, and the workers wanted their share of the booming industry. In the article, IAM President Roy Scheimiller explained, quote, "These corporations netted more than $200 million last year. They are enjoying the greatest prosperity in their history. There is no question of her ability to pay. The issue is whether the employees deserve to share in the prosperity of their industry and how much." He went on to say, "Our members on these airlines are not satisfied with the offers made in negotiations so far. Under the American system and under American labor law, they have a right to strike. Only under communism and fascism are human beings forced to work against their will." At 6 a.m., the machinists were called to strike against United, TWA, Eastern, Northwest, and National. The striking workers picketed at 230 airports throughout the United States. It's estimated that 60% of all flights were impacted by the strike. The work action wore on for 3 weeks. Then the White House got involved. President Lyndon B. Johnson helped broker an offer of a 4.5% annual raise for the workers for each of the 3 years. But the union members voted it down. The vote was nearly 3-1 against taking the offer. Finally, the strike was settled after 43 days. The machinist members had won a 6% raise.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I like the idea of going after criminals. I think it's a good idea. I think we go after these oligarchs, no matter where they're from. We go after the money. We use that money in a way that benefits we the people. I don't see a downside to it. Don't see a downside to it. Interesting news today. Elon Musk is going to walk away from the Twitter deal. A couple of Elon Musk stories, and I'm waiting for interesting little bit about Musk. There's been this kind of building him up. Oh, he's a fighter of democracy. Oh, he's wonderful. Lots of build up, waiting for the fall. Because like everything, that's what we love to do in this country. We love to build people up just so we can push them off the edge and watch them fall. Musk going to be one of them. My favorite comment on Musk today, because there were 2 competing stories. The one of him trying to walk away from the deal on Twitter because I guess doesn't want to spend the $44 billion for Twitter. And then the court filing that it turns out that he's got 9 kids that nobody knew about. And so the funny part is I guess Twitter's the only thing he knows how to pull out of. Wasn't that funny? So yeah, this is going to be interesting because there's going to be the big lawsuit because Twitter's going, hey, you've caused us a lot of damage. $44 billion is what you agreed to pay for it. There's a whole bunch. We'll see you in court. And yeah, gonna be interesting to see what happens in the court of Delaware there, because that's where this will be fought out. So yeah, fun. Also, some more fun. You've got our good friends in Wisconsin. Republicans in Wisconsin have lost their mind. Evidently, there's a lieutenant governor candidate, Mandela Barnes, a Democrat, who I guess a while ago gave a speech on slavery and said slavery was bad. Slavery was terrible. And talked about, that it was a sin against God. It was a sin against, the Constitution. The whole system was bad for black people. It was bad. And at the time, no blowback, nothing like that. It was awful. I think awful was the word that he used. This now, evidently, since it is it's election season, you've now got Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, Republican gubernatorial candidate Rebecca Kleefisch, now going after him for using the word awful and attacking him and all Democrats, making them condemn the use of the word awful in describing slavery. And we're in this weird kind of moment where conservatives I'm not quite sure what's going on between the ears, because when I learned about slavery, I learned that it was awful. I learned that it was terrible. I learned it was much worse than that. And when we did our civil rights tour back in 2013, the images and the stories that I heard, awful and terrible, are sanitized words for what it was. So if our snowflakes on the right, if our sensitive folks on the extreme right who would be attacking this guy can't take the word awful, real truth, real history, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that they're fighting reality. The interesting thing here is, and there have been a bunch of people going around, talking to conservatives about what they view history should be. And there's there's a difference in what history should be and what history is. Some of the responses that I've seen from conservatives is we should be talking about the good things, all the how wonderful we are, the high ideal stuff, and not actual real stuff. Not taking into account the entire breadth of our history. Because we've done some great things. We've also done some, well, to use Mr. Barnes' word, some awful, awful things. That's what history is. The fact that our snowflakes on the right can't seem to understand that's awful. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you download the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, ours will be there. Grab that. Also, make sure you share, subscribe, like, comment, all of it.
So while the Supreme Court case is very important, it's not the only game in town.
Right-wing Supreme Court strikes major blow to EPA's ability to regulate carbon emissions. Residential natural gas stoves leak carcinogens even when turned off, study finds. Plus, clean energy jobs are booming. Fossil fuel jobs are shrinking.
All of those booms and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Getting to a wedding costs an arm and a leg. Gas is so expensive, you can bring it as a wedding gift.
This is your Green News Report.
And make sure you hold on to it, though. Your grandkids can sell it to a warlord for water.
Okay, Desi Doyen, the day that we have long predicted, long feared would come, has now arrived.
As expected, the right-wing supermajority on the stolen and packed U.S. Supreme Court has issued a disturbing landmark ruling in West Virginia versus EPA. That's a lawsuit brought by Republican attorneys general over emission standards that never took effect. The 6-3 majority ruled that despite the Clean Air Act's broad textual mandate, the EPA does not have the authority to regulate carbon dioxide emissions from power plants, because Congress didn't explicitly say regulate carbon emissions. The decision kneecaps the agency at a critical time when scientists warn the window is closing to act to prevent catastrophic climate impacts. It throws a wrench into new standards being developed by the Biden administration. However, in an interview with Sky News before the ruling, EPA Chief Michael Regan said the agency has other tools.
The president has a number of tools in his toolbox. And as we look at all of the regulations that govern power plants, we have regulations that look at traditional air pollutants, water pollutants, and coal ash or, hazardous waste cleanup. So while the Supreme Court case is very important, it's not the only game in town.
Well, good luck with those other tools. Given what the Supreme Court has decided, it's clear to me, at least, that they are also going to handcuff the agency on those other rules as well.
Yes, the ruling is the pinnacle of Republicans and their funders' decades-long corrupt coordinated scheme to stack the court and handcuff the EPA from issuing future climate and pollution regulations. And it can also be used to gut the government's ability to regulate corporate behavior in other sectors.
There is a reason I don't call these right-wingers conservative. They aren't conservative at all. They are radicals.
And it matters because climate research shows that man-made global warming has now escalated the risk of compound disasters that interact with self-reinforcing feedbacks. A new study has found that extreme dryness in the U.S. West's man-made megadrought boosted hot temperatures by 4 degrees last summer, intensifying both heat waves and wildfires, with greater cascading impacts together than each disaster on its own.
So it's all getting terrible all at once.
A different study finds that most U.S. cities are seeing more extremely hot days overall than in the past because of global warming. More than half of U.S. cities now see at least 7 more extremely hot days than in the 1970s, with the hottest summer temperatures arriving much earlier and persisting later into the fall. In other news, new scientific research shows that residential natural gas stoves leak carcinogens, including benzene and 20 other toxic air pollutants that are linked to birth defects and cancers, and they do it even when turned off.
So that is the clean natural gas we hear so much about?
So-called.
Nice.
This is the first study to document additional pollutants included in the natural gas that's piped into homes, part of a growing body of research identifying natural gas as a significant source of indoor pollution.
Electrify, please.
But some good news. In Oklahoma's Republican Senate primary this week, Trump's wildly corrupt, scandal-plagued first EPA director, Scott Pruitt, lost his bid for the U.S. Senate to replace retiring climate science denier Senator James Inhofe. And he lost badly.
So there's that, at least.
And finally, jobs in the U.S. renewable energy sector rose faster than overall U.S. employment in 2021, and it made up for job losses in the fossil fuel industry, even as fossil fuel production increased. The Department of Energy's annual jobs report out this week detailed dramatic growth across the entire clean energy sector in 2021 and found that the fossil fuel extraction industry lost more than 31,000 jobs, while the electric vehicle sector alone created 45,000 jobs, a stunning 25% increase over the previous year.
So there's that as well. We'll take what we can get. Thank you very much. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we could not get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you
tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is an interesting little story. Evidently, Robert Costello, he's one of Steve Bannon's lawyers. Evidently, he is looking to withdraw from representing Steve Bannon, citing the possibility that he could be called as a witness in his trial. That's interesting. Now, this goes hand in hand with the news today, the Friday dump of the possibility of Donald Trump signing a letter that would waive executive privilege for Steve Bannon. And most legal experts are going, what privilege? What privilege could he possibly have, and what letter? I'm not making this up. This is the world that we're in. But the Costello thing, interesting to me. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, there's another hearing coming up next week. Cannot wait for that. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst Bob Ney, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So what do you make of this attorney going, hey, you know what? I think I may need to bail on this because, well, I may be a witness.
Well, there's a couple of interesting things, Rick. First of all, we know that Trump doesn't do anything out of the goodness of his heart. And some would say there is none, but he doesn't do anything out of the goodness of it. And his statement, today about, that they let leak about the fact that he may and pull the executive privilege from Bannon, there's a reason behind that. And then you look at this story today about Robert Costello. I've got to think somehow there's something going on that's connected behind the scenes that obviously Costello and Bannon and Trump and Trump's advisors know. So, Trump is trying to, get out of this and the executive privilege. First of all, he's legally wrong anyway because Bannon was not engaged officially with Trump on January the 6th anyway.
Right.
So there is no executive privilege for that period of time. Now, Costello's interesting because Costello's name was redacted, but he was figured in Robert Mueller's report as the attorney who told Michael Cohen that he had, quote, friends in high places after the FBI raided his home. Cohen's home was raided, and then Costello's the one that told him that. And Costello, in the Mueller report, describes him, again, it was redacted, his name, but we know now, described him as a back channel to Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and that's what the friends in high places was referring to. So you start to see Costello's connection is a little bit more than attorney, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, kind of consigliere. He's kind of
well, there you go. I was looking for the word. You're right.
Kind of a mob situation here.
I just watched Godfather today. That's really weird you said that. So anyway, something of that order.
Yeah, no, I mean this is kind of the what I've always said about the Trump presidency. I mean this is a guy who was trained by Roy Cohn. I mean, it's not surprising to me that he has behaved the way he has. I saw this great cartoon today, of Ray, it's a little baby Trump and Roy Cohn, being his mentor and going, okay, yeah, you lost the chess game. Now kick over the chessboard and say you won. That's this is it. This is the kind of training that he got, years of this stuff. So it's not surprising this is how he behaves.
Right. And there's been question of Costello's, claims of conduct that's been made against his client, et cetera. It's just a whole barrage and mess. The other thing I think that is happening here, and I don't know so much, with some of the other attorneys, but the fact that Rudy Giuliani ran afoul of the being an attorney and his bar privileges, I think some of these attorneys realized that it goes beyond attorney-client privilege. When Costello, and again in the redacted material, Mueller's report, when Costello makes a phone call and he calls to a man, Cohen, who's been raided and says, we have friends in high places, again, that is all going beyond the legal bounds of what you're supposed to do as an attorney. And I think a lot of these people are just really a little bit worried probably about, getting in trouble with their law license.
Yeah, well, look, and a lot of that coded language. Hey, we got friends in high places. Hey, there are people who are watching. Hey, you got a mighty nice house there. Be ashamed if something happened to it. That's how things work.
Right, and when this all starts to unravel, and again, I think that's one of the reasons that Trump is considering not invoking the privilege that he's been invoking with Bannon, is because I think some of the lawyers are probably advising them, look, this is all going way beyond where it should be or have been. And, they thought, look, let's face something, too. When a lot of these things were happening, Cohen, which was before, January 6th, a lot of these things were happening, they thought that Trump would be president again. Giuliani thought he would be president again. So therefore, how much can you get away with? Quite a lot.
Yeah. No, I think it's the reason they did all the things that they did, because they thought they were going to get away with it.
Sure.
And I think a lot of them, like Scott Perry, my congressman, thought he'd get a pardon, and he didn't. So consequences for you, Scott, and all the other people who sought pardons.
Right. Well, Scott Perry's case and the others, why, if you are simply asking a question or you're simply voting against the election process, which happens, why would you think you need a pardon?
Yep. No, that's the $1 million question,
I'd ask that
isn't
question.
it?
I'd like to be a news reporter, if he's at some event, and ask him, why did you think you needed a pardon?
Well, I think his answer is he didn't. He has said he didn't ask for one. I think that's been his response. They're all lying. They're all lying defense.
Right.
Everyone's lying about me. They're all bad. They're all out to get me. Now, the other big story today, Pat Cipollone, I can never say his name, Cipollone, testified for 8 hours today. He had to have something to say, I think. No?
Well, I do think he had something to say, and I think if you look at, if you look at Zoe Lofgren, by the way, she is chair of House Administration, which I used to chair. She was a member of my committee. She's a pretty straightforward person. If you look at what Zoe Lofgren had to say, which was carefully said by her, which it should be, okay? She said that the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, did not contradict the testimony of previous witnesses, plural, when he met with the panel today. And they also said, this is a very interesting note by Zoe Lofgren, that it was a very, basically, not tough process, but that it was a, arduous, it was a long process. In other words, something definite positive, I think, has come out of this, but it was a long, multi-hour process where I think they carefully went over everything. And there was no bad response to him in particular. They said that he did answer candidly and, quote, carefully. Now, the careful part, I think, is very clear, and that is where, in fact, he has attorney-client privilege directly with Trump. But we have to remember the second part. Nobody's talking about this, Rick. He was counsel not to a human being also. He was counsel to the White House.
Yes, and that
the
was
institution.
Yes.
Nobody talks about that.
So I don't understand why he would have any executive privilege or any client privilege with Trump at all. That's not his client. His client is the White House.
Well, I think on this is a guess of mine because I've been paying attention to exactly what you just said for the past couple of days. There must have been some interaction he had with Trump as a general, maybe legal advice beyond the scope of the White House itself. And I think probably he's trying to not violate that, but I don't see the committee, lashing out at him about trying to hide something. So I think there are some rare things he must have had a conversation with, and I will assume the committee is probably agreeing with that to stay within the bounds of not being in the public testimony. And I think it's agreed to.
Yeah, but one of the things that like you said, what Zoe Lofgren said is that he didn't contradict Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, and her testimony was damning.
Right. And also, the big note about the Secret Service is going to come out, and now they find out that the guy has had a history of lying. That kind of went away, and he transcends. He as the counsel for the White House, he transcends some individual conversations that can be brought up by a couple of the Secret Service agents. This is the guy in the know, the guy that was there, and this is the guy that told Hutchinson and others, we're not going down there. There's enough sort of room to legally charge a ton of people on January the 6th. That was his statement.
Yeah, I want to see those 8 hours. They got to be televised. I would like to have seen them televised. It wasn't gonna happen.
They'll pull parts of it out.
Yeah, but still, I'd like to see it in its entirety at some point.
Sure.
Now, you've got this Oath Keeper guy, this Stuart Rhodes, who is saying that he'll testify, but only going to do it publicly, live broadcast. This is one of those things where I got to tell you, my first thought when I saw this is, one, he wants to grandstand. He wants to make a mockery of the proceeding. And the committee probably told him to go pound sand, which is why I think this is coming out in the media and not through the committee.
Right, and he went. I think he went to The Hill, one of the magazines, and he was pushing for his day. He wants to publicly testify. You're right, and he's of course the leader of the far right. It's a militia group, and is incarcerated, by the way, and awaiting trial on seditious conspiracy charges, which can carry up to 20 years. So he does want his day out to have a sandwich, outside where he's at. And up on Capitol Hill, he'd like to get out for a little while. I mean, I'm not criticizing; been there, done that.
Yeah, no.
So he wants, but he said during the interview that there was some pleading of the Fifth, and I'm reading all this. I'm thinking, no. If I was on the committee, my advice would be no. It could turn into a complete nightmare. I don't think he has that much to offer. He's under a sedition trial. Let's see what he has to say in court. Then they can use that.
That's exactly it.
See what he says in court.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst, talking about the top stories of the day. And the big one today, Bob, the president signed an executive order on abortive rights. Any thoughts on this? I mean, how much weight can this executive order have in protecting women's right to access to abortive care nationwide, considering, now this is being thrown back to the states. You look at a state like Louisiana that has a near total ban on abortions. Mississippi closed its last abortion clinic. How much weight does this executive order, how much does this have, and what's it going to mean, do you think?
Oh, let me answer it this way, Rick. Better than not doing it.
Right,
okay?
Had to do something.
Yep, better than not doing it. Look, the pressure was there. The president was under some heat. Because 2 months ago this leaked out, people thought there should have been some, proaction on the entire process before that. So the White House comes up, it signs its executive order, and it takes the, certain steps to preserve abortion access. Now, it's also going to go into the tech side of this, as we know from this order. And I mention that because the tech side of it, and I'll throw this out here for interstate commerce purposes, the morning after pill, technically some of the states are going to say you can't ship that to our state, but you have a federal government Interstate Commerce Act, and I think some of the executive order will delve into clarification of, what you can mail, what you can receive, et cetera, how you can order through the through the tech system, how we order online, everything. So I think some of that's going to happen. But basically, a lot of the additional actions are going to depend on the Congress. So the White House is saying that this executive order builds on steps to protect abortion access, and that will provide some money, by the way, $3 million in new funding. That'll be for training and technical assistance. Now, why do they need training and technical assistance? You said this on your show right when this hit. This is just the beginning. what's the law? Somebody walks up. What can you do? What can you get through the mail? There's going to have to be a lot of education on these issues to see how people are going to proceed. So that's in there in the in the whole issue.
Yeah, no, I have friends who are doctors, and we're going to have him on here in a couple of days. He was an ER doctor, and he's like, who knows what the brave new world's going to be for an ER doctor in dealing with this, with the fallout and aggressive district attorneys, because after all, a lot of these places that have life of a mother in the law, those are defenses. Those aren't rights. Those are defenses. That's after you do something, you can now go and defend yourself. And how long do you have to wait before something happens? There's nothing good here. It's all bad.
Right. And you said it best when this all broke. This is going to go from anger and people being upset and protesting to all of a sudden people saying, wait a minute, we've got to deal with all these different issues and all the legalities and what do the doctors do? There's a whole series of things out here. So I think the order will be helpful, and it'll also, this is the big part of the order too. This executive order instructs the Departments of Justice and Health and Human Services to push back on efforts to limit access to abortion medication or traveling across state lines. So this actually does directly inject the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services into the process, and I think that's great for people for clarification, direction, and guidance.
No, he had to do something, and this was what you were going to get. Ultimately, you're going to have to get back down to dwelling and drilling down onto the state level and fight the fights on the state level. It's that simple. Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
You too. Thank you.
Our good friend, former Congressman Bob Ney. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break right here. Right back after this. Remember, if you miss any portion of the program, download the podcast. Always there, always available. Wherever you get yours, you'll find ours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Arizona on the forefront of attacking accountability. The same week that a federal judge sentenced the former police officer in Minnesota, Derek Chauvin, to more than 21 years more prison time for the murder of George Floyd, Arizona stepped up and said, you know what, maybe we should make it harder to have those videos. Maybe we should pass a law that says, we want to make sure that recording stuff doesn't happen as often. And what they've done is they're going to make it illegal for bystanders to record police officers, and they're saying at close range. And they're defining close range as anything closer than 8 feet. So you've got to be more than 8 feet away. And I'm just waiting for people with a tape measure to come out. And the second someone is recording closer to 8 feet, slap the cuffs on them. It will be a $500 fine, up to 30 days in jail, and probation up to a year. This is, again, another one of these moments where you go, wrong approach, maybe the wrong end of this attack, maybe different police training, maybe just a thought, maybe not have the situations that we've had pop up. I look at what's went on in Ohio. This is just totally unacceptable. But at least we'll have, video from further than 8 feet in Arizona. And I got to wait for other states to do similar things and then to continue to change the parameters until eventually we're in free speech zones or in free video zones, blocks away. This is where I keep coming back to. We have got to reclaim our public spaces. We've got to reclaim direct action. We've got to reclaim democracy. And it's going to be uncomfortable. I go back and as a student of labor history, you think back into what built the labor movement. We think of, the 1930s as that era of the passage of the Wagner Act and the New Deal that helped usher in this wave of unionization. Yeah, that's what when we like to think of it, but it was all that organizing that went on before, all of those people in the streets, all of the struggle, all of the battles. That's the stuff that we got to remember. And, I look back in this kind of moment and go, we do need to remember a little bit of our history in this vein. And think back to, what it took to build that prosperous working class. It was those sit-down strikes. It was a generation of workers literally tearing this country apart brick by brick that caused the Brett Kavanaughs of the world to be uncomfortable, to miss their dessert. Because we had a Supreme Court back then, much like the one we're getting now. The Lochner Court did not want maximum hour laws. They didn't want minimum wage laws. They didn't want, unionization rights. They didn't want any of those things for working people. They didn't want to end child labor. People demanded it. People protested. People were in the streets demanding it. People voted. And we've got to reclaim that. I've been saying for years, all the years I've been doing this show, my great fear is that my children are going to have to fight the same fights that my grandparents' generation had to fight. And increasingly, that is becoming the reality. Increasingly, it's going to be my great-grandchildren who are going to have to fight the really desperate fights. Because the moneyed interests, the corporatists who are leading us, the theocrats that are leading us in this direction, they're heavily funded, well-organized, and committed to taking your rights away, to taking our rights away, to enriching themselves, to giving themselves more power. And yet in this moment, we the people still have the ability to change things. And that's what they fear the most, the unwashed masses, the rabble, you and me. That's what they fear, which is why they want to limit the access of people to vote, especially poor people, especially working class people. And that's why in this moment, we got to be fighting back and saying, you know what? No more. Hold on to that right to vote. Cherish it. Demand it. Use it. It's that simple. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. We'll take a quick break. Right back with David Pepper, former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1966. That was the day that the International Association of Machinists went out on strike. The day before, the Machinists newsletter, published out of Washington, D.C., declared strike set on 5 airlines. During the first half of the 1960s, the airline industry had invested in new equipment and jet technology. Now those investments were paying off in huge profits, and the workers wanted their share of the booming industry. In the article, IAM President Roy Scheimiller explained, quote, "These corporations netted more than $200 million last year. They are enjoying the greatest prosperity in their history. There is no question of her ability to pay. The issue is whether the employees deserve to share in the prosperity of their industry and how much." He went on to say, "Our members on these airlines are not satisfied with the offers made in negotiations so far. Under the American system and under American labor law, they have a right to strike. Only under communism and fascism are human beings forced to work against their will." At 6 a.m., the machinists were called to strike against United, TWA, Eastern, Northwest, and National. The striking workers picketed at 230 airports throughout the United States. It's estimated that 60% of all flights were impacted by the strike. The work action wore on for 3 weeks. Then the White House got involved. President Lyndon B. Johnson helped broker an offer of a 4.5% annual raise for the workers for each of the 3 years. But the union members voted it down. The vote was nearly 3-1 against taking the offer. Finally, the strike was settled after 43 days. The machinist members had won a 6% raise.
It's a serious handicap for an elected leader to be a lame duck. Far worse, though, if the leader is just plain lame. Poor Joe Biden has tumbled into both ditches. He set himself up for lame duckism in the 2020 race by promising voters that he would merely be, quote, a bridge, not anything else. He portrayed himself as a bipartisan inside player, an interim senior statesman who would calmly pilot the ship of state from Trump's bombast to whomever was next. But just a year and a half into his presidency, the duckism has kicked in, and he's scrambling to insist that he's still the president, now planning to run again in 2024. But that only highlights Biden's inherent lameness. He's playing president rather than being one. Take his embarrassingly meek response to the Supreme Court's 6 partisan extremists who just nullified the fundamental freedom of all women in America to control their own bodies. Biden called the court's dictate terrible. But what did he do? His first, quote, action was to send out a fundraising mailing asking for $15 donations to re-elect Democrats. Then he flew off on a 4-day trip abroad. Roundly condemned for being AWOL, he belatedly held a press conference in Spain, calling the court's attack on women, quote, destabilizing. Gosh, Joe, so harsh. Then he called on Congress to do something. But wait, aren't you the president? Shouldn't you at least be here, show up on the front lines, and treat this as the democracy emergency it is? Hello, 6 besotted judicial right-wingers who think their black robes make them little gods have just sanctimoniously usurped an innate human right. This is Jim Hightower saying, the 70% of Americans who oppose the ungodly arrogance of these 6 judges need a real president, one who will fight like hell to restore this right. And the question they have is, where is Joe?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So either hijinks in Ohio or a disgusting prank or mean or evidently someone sent about, I'm guessing it was like 25 state senators, care packages. Yes, a giant bag of envelopes full of feces. Somehow, I don't know how they thought this was going to get through the mailroom, and I feel sorry for the poor person who had to deliver the envelopes full of you know what, but I'm guessing this is what the voters in Ohio are starting to think of their state senators. And for all of the you know what coming out of that state, I don't know. I'm not condoning. I'm not saying it's the right thing. but I kind of understand. Here to share some thoughts on what's going on in the state of Ohio. I've asked David Pepper to come talk with us. David is the former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, also the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
So, what do you make? What do you make of this hijinks? Was this a message? Thoughts on the feces gate?
Well, I like you, I don't condone sending feces, but I will say it tells you something that when they were upset about something, they knew where to send it, which is actually new. Most people, this is why I wrote the book Laboratories of Autocracy. People spend so much time worrying about Congress that they don't realize that most of the worst policies are coming out of state houses. And that ends up being one reason that Koch brothers and the right-wing interests all use state houses to do their dirty work is because they don't think anyone's paying attention. So I'd rather have them send something, obviously not feces, but I'm glad people are starting to see, and they're seeing it around the country, that the front line of the attack on our rights and on democracy are generally these state houses. And the Supreme Court's role is to uphold those crazy laws. But it all starts in state capitals when people generally aren't paying attention. So I'll give them credit for starting to see that that's where the problem really lies. And until we start campaigning harder in these state level races in more states, the other side's going to keep winning.
No, and I think the Supreme Court has signaled that everything's now going to be about the states. And I remember on election night 2016, I had a very conservative acquaintance at the time tell me it was going to be very fun for him to watch all the liberals turn into states' rights activists. Yeah. Because it was, in his view, back on that night in 2016, this is where we were going to be, because he was paying attention to what Republicans had been saying for decades, that this is where they wanted to take us, and this is where we are, David.
Yeah, and on the flip side, in 2020, we thought we had won everything we're supposed to win, Senate, presidency, and the House, but Republicans held on to the state houses all over, and they've been chugging away ever since. So, one of the things the reason the subtitle of my book is a wake-up call, I think Democrats, and frankly, more broadly, those who care about democracy, need to see that the state houses are playing the leading role for the far right. That's where they cook up their worst stuff, whether it's attacking workers, whether it's attacking voting rights, whether it's attacking Roe v. Wade. And so even though we thought we'd won in 20, when they won their battle for state houses, they could still keep doing what they've been doing, and we've been seeing it ever since. Yeah. And my call to Democrats is, yes, vote for Tim Ryan. He could win, and that would make a huge difference in Fetterman. But really help that state rep candidate, that state Senate candidate, even if they're in a tough district, if we don't start filling out our ballots all the way through and giving to those people and supporting them other ways, winning just the federal and then leaving the state for the other side is not a winning strategy.
No, I say it all the time. It's these midterm elections, it's these off-year elections, if you will, that are so important. Your local dog catcher, your local mayor, your state reps. Those are the real positions that affect your daily, everyday lives. Absolutely. And those seem to get the least amount of turnout and the least amount of interest, which is just insane to me. That seems to me where the passion would be, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Yeah,
especially when in many of these states, these are the most extreme people. Jim Jordan feels crazy in Congress. He'd fit right in with 40 other people just like him at the Ohio State House. But we all focus on those people. But can you imagine what these extremists, the high they must feel when they pass the worst law after the worst law after the worst law, and they don't even have an opponent in the next election? It's like a gift that they don't deserve, or their opponent is so underfunded, no one even knows they're running. Yeah. We can't keep letting that happen, because, again, these are people passing, you saw in Ohio, laws that not only forbid abortion, but no exceptions for rape or incest. A 10-year-old is stuck going to Indiana. They're doing all sorts of other crazy laws, and many of the people who are passing these laws don't even have an opponent. That's the definition of insanity that we keep repeating. We can't keep letting that happen.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to push back a little bit. Isn't this the party's problem? Isn't this the fact that the Democratic Party hasn't done this stuff? I mean, we've had
Totally.
Democratic Party chairmen come in and, hey, we're going to have 50 state strategies. We're going to do all this stuff. And nothing seems to filter down. I think Obama was one of the greatest organizers in the history of our country. He organized like nobody else. And what he organized was well for Obama. He got himself elected and there were no coattails. I think there's a problem here, David. And I think it starts with the Democratic Party.
I think that it's both the party, but it's the bigger players too. I'm good friends with Jamie Harrison. He gets this. He was a chair of a South Carolina Democratic Party. He would have lived this stuff. The other side, the Koch brothers made this decision decades ago. And we need enough players on our side, not just to say the words, but to put the money where you do have a 50-state strategy, like Howard Dean talked about. And we get so caught up in the next cycle and the urgency of the next cycle that we give hundreds of millions to 7 Senate candidates, and we hope that it trickles down to everybody else. And we're against trickle-down economics, right?
Yep.
Well, it doesn't work any better in politics. That state rep candidate, it helps them that Tim Ryan's running a good campaign, but they need enough money to run their own campaign against an opponent who's an extremist. Until we start filtering support at all those levels, the top of the ticket trickle-down theory doesn't work. And we're seeing that play out again. Biden won, but a whole lot of people who voted for Biden then voted for Republicans for State House. We can't let that happen again.
No, I'm right there with you. And at the end of this, you look at all the bad legislation that's happened. I mean, Louisiana is about ready to ban abortion completely. Today you had the president sign an executive order. And I'm not an expert on executive orders. I don't know how much weight this is going to have in protecting women and their right to getting the care that they need. I mean, it's the tool that he has. He's doing what he can. But this has got to come back to people getting out and voting.
And Joe Biden, and again, I don't put it on him, but Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, all of them, if they ever are saying, here's what we're going to do about Roe or the other issues, if they don't include, and we're going to go back and fight in the state houses where this is starting, they're not doing it as broadly as they need to. Until someone back in an Ohio district feels political pressure against them for voting for these crazy laws, they will never stop. And executive orders will never close the gap. So everyone and I see so many national politicians, their only answer is go elect another U.S. senator. Of course we need to do that. But until we go back to states and make those individual state house members feel like, my God, they're coming at me. Gavin Newsom started running ads in Florida the other day. That's what I'm talking about. Go back to the state level where they're doing the worst things and never being held accountable, and run hard there. Make them fear their next election. That's how you'll start changing behavior, not only through federal action. And that's the part I never see. Kamala Harris is the only person I've seen in the last couple months who literally said the sentence, and we have to vote all the way down the ballot, including State House. Almost no one else ever says those words, and that's the problem.
You're absolutely right. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with David Pepper. David's the former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, also the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. We'll get links out on social media how you can pick up a copy of that. Now, we're moving into this era, as you're pointing out, that it's all coming back to the states, and we've got to fight these fights on the state level, and we're already, as you point out, way behind. Yeah. Because, as the line goes, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. And I don't know how you change that dynamic because, look, I like Jamie Harrison. I don't think there was a chance of him taking out Lindsey Graham. The woman, Amy McGrath in Kentucky, there was no way she was taking out, Mitch McConnell. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars that could have been so better used in state races across this country, fighting the battle where right where you're talking about.
Yeah. And I don't ever fault Amy McGrath for raising that money. She was doing what a candidate does. Here's where the fault lies. Those are mostly small dollar donors who get inspired. And we need to more broadly inspire them to see, hey, give $50 million to Amy McGrath. Let's take the other 50 and split it up among all these districts where we often don't even have candidates. And that is the better bet on democracy long term. Again, that's what the Koch brothers did. They said, we wanted to win the presidency. But if we want to control democracy, we go through state houses. We have to do a better job collectively of one, making sure people see that. You know, here Amy McGrath has $100 million, and all around the states that she's running in are dozens of districts for the state houses that don't even have an opponent. And so, yes, we have to more broadly communicate, hey, if you've got $20 to give it to Tim Ryan 1 month. The next month, give it in a way that goes to people in your own state who are running for state house. Don't only give to the 6 or 7 sexy Senate races that come up every cycle. Also give to that level, or again, we will never catch up. You know, maybe we'll save the day with the Senate win this year, but if even we win that and we don't make any movement back at state house level, we're still always on defense, and you don't win by only being on defense.
No, and this is where I come back to what we do here at the program. I mean, the right has a much bigger megaphone, they're a much bigger church, if you will. You know, they're out there, they're pounding the message. The left hasn't built this as well. There isn't the kind of messaging machine. There isn't the kind of megaphone that's out there. So there's not all that free attention that the right gets in the media space. And I keep asking why that hasn't been built.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes to one really important part of this. This has very little to do with Ronna McDaniel, the head of the Republican Party. This is outside money and dark money, like the Koch brothers, deciding themselves that separate from the party, they were going to do this. And so it didn't matter who the party chair was. It doesn't matter who the presidential candidate is. In a way, Donald Trump screwed up their operation. He was given this huge mechanism, and he's such an idiot, pardon my French, that he kind of blew it.
Yeah.
But what they built is more top down because it's actually separate from the Republican Party. It's a whole operation funded in so many different ways. It boosts these state rep candidates. It gives them the legislation and tells them what to pass. And the Democrats just don't have that. I mean, one, the other side's a little more sneaky. Two, by the way, one reason what they built is so big is for them, it's not charity or public service. It's an investment. They have made thousands of times over in profits in terms of more than they invested to create the system we're talking about.
Yep.
So it's literally like the Koch brothers pay $100, they get thousands in return in tax breaks. And that's why it's become so big. On our side, we're begging people to help build something out of sort of civic duty, which they should do. But for the other side, it's tied directly to, so the MO of these state houses is massive privatization and profit making for energy companies, private charter school for-profit companies. So they're making money through this system, have no doubt. And that's one reason why, for them, it's proven to be such a great investment.
No, and look, they play the game much better. I mean, we end up playing.
They're more ruthless.
They're much more ruthless.
And I do think that, and I'm frustrated that the easiest way to stop so much of what I'm talking about right now would be real hardball from the U.S. Senate and passing some measures around protecting democracy in states. And I believe that if we allow this 2-year window, maybe we'll win the Senate, and so we can still do it. The House may be the bigger worry. But if we do not pass major measures to protect democracy and certain rights in the window of time where we're in charge, I'm afraid you and I in 20 years will look back and say, my God, that was the window where we should have done it, and we've been paying the price ever since. There are levers they could use, even against the U.S. Supreme Court, but they're just sitting there. And the filibuster has no business blocking legislation that would protect democracy.
No, I'm right there with you, and which is where I wanted to go to end this, because Wisconsin, their state Supreme Court just banned ballot drop boxes.
Yeah.
And again, we're going to see a lot of this stuff going on.
Totally.
The Supreme Court's taking up that North Carolina case. This, and you're not being hyperbolic. This in 20 years could be a moment that we look back and go, did we make the right choice, or did we fail our children?
No, and there are moments in history, and I won't go through the details here, but in 1890, the U.S. faced a choice about would they get tough on the attacks on black voters in the South, and they chose not to, and 80 years of Jim Crow followed. One thing about drop boxes that is just really telling. There were drop boxes all over Salt Lake City and Anchorage, Alaska a few years ago, and no one cared. No one cared. No one said there was anything wrong with that. But the minute you saw large numbers of African Americans voting through drop boxes in 2020, all of a sudden, they got to go. It's a classic example where the minute the other side sees, whether it was early vote for Obama or drop boxes, that especially black voters are voting a certain way, even before when they didn't care, all of a sudden they hammer it closed. And that's happening in Georgia and Texas and Florida and Wisconsin that happened in Ohio. I wrote about it in my book. It's just they go after the voters that they view as their opposition and make voting much harder. That's all Dropbox bans are about. And it's one of many examples. And again, the voting rights legislation that could stop that is sitting in the Senate and could be passed in the coming months. And if I were Chuck Schumer, they had one vote in January, and they've never brought it up again. We've got 6 months left. They should not quit. You know, Republicans in Ohio were found to have violated the Constitution 5 times. They keep going. They keep going. They keep going. And finally, they win. Democrats have a single vote in January on voting rights. Don't quite make it. They never bring it up again. Again, they're tougher. We have to keep fighting for these things. Go back to Manchin and Sinema. Be tougher on them. We quit after one try. They never quit. That's why we lose.
That's why we lose. But David, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Hope people will take the words to heart. Good stuff, man.
Thanks. Take care.
David Pepper, former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party. Make sure you check out his book, Laboratories of Autocracy. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1862. Ella Reeves' mother Bloor was born in Staten Island, New York. She was a labor activist who investigated child labor in glass factories and mines. She also worked undercover in meatpacking plants to verify for federal investigators the horrible working conditions described by Upton Sinclair in his famous book, The Jungle. Ella Bloor ran for lieutenant governor of New York on the socialist ticket in 1918. In 1919, she helped to found the Communist Party of the United States of America, and later served as a delegate to the Second International. When she returned from the Soviet Union, Bloor hitchhiked around the U.S. while writing articles for the Daily Worker newspaper. Bloor worked closely with many notable progressives, including labor leader Eugene Debs. She was a founding member of Debs' group, Social Democracy of America. She agreed to write a children's column for the organization's newspaper before moving on to other political organizing. Later, she rejoined Debs in the Socialist Party of America. She helped fellow socialist Upton Sinclair gather information about the Chicago stockyards that became the basis of his book, The Jungle. In fact, Sinclair sent Ella with Mr. Bloor to pose as a couple to gather information about the stockyards. They were not married, but Ella adopted the name Mother Bloor. Bloor died on August 10, 1951. Her legacy includes the autobiography We Are Many. The book inspired Woody Guthrie's song, The 1913 Massacre. The song recounts the story of a massacre of striking copper miners in Calumet, Michigan at a Christmas party that Bloor attended.
Take a trip with me in 1913.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, Marjorie Trainwreck Green, this is another one of those moments where you go, how is it possible that someone in this day and age can go, you know, there were these horrible shootings. And, you know, it defies logic. That you could look at something, you know, it's right in front of you, factual, it's right in front of you, and completely deny reality. Now, you've got Green, who's saying that the two shootings on July 4th, one in a rich white neighborhood, the other at a fireworks display. It almost sounds like it's designed to persuade Republicans to go along with more gun control. I mean, after all, we didn't see that happen at all during the Pride parades in the month of June. I don't quite know what that part means, but she's suggesting that these are staged, that there's some nefarious. This is the dog whistle here is. The dog whistle is, hey, those liberals are doing this so that they'll shame us into gun control. I mean, this is how these people think. Because, and again, I go back to what I always believe. When someone's accusing you of something, when someone says you're doing this, and you're not, of course, it's because it's something that they either have done or would do. And it's something that they've thought of. It's their tactic. It's played out over and over and over again. That's just how it is. Generally, when someone says, you're cheating on me, they're the one cheating. Generally, when someone says, you're stealing from me, they're the one robbing you blind. This is that scenario. You know, when conservatives were saying, the IRS is targeting conservatives, they're going after us because of our values and our beliefs. And everyone's going, there's no proof of that. No, the IRS was not targeting Tea Party groups. You were screwing up the law. You were not meeting the requirements. They were going after liberal groups who did the same thing. They were pretty even across the board. There just happened to be more of you seeking the same tax breaks. And just because you were held accountable doesn't mean you were special. You're not a victim. You were a criminal. So what happens? We find out Trump does what? Uses the IRS to go after Comey and McCabe, and his former henchman, Michael Cohen. Because what are the chances that 3 people in that orbit are going to get, and 2 of them getting the autopsy? What are the chances that, the chances are you have the better chance of winning a state lottery twice. And why is that? Well, because of the incestuous world that people live in. Because we've been trained not to trust our news media. And we've got a right-wing news media in this country that is second to none. We got a propaganda machine second to none. So when Ron Johnson comes out and tells Real America's Voice that Joe Biden is compromised because he financed a global sex scandal, operation, you know the people on the right are going, hey, Joe Biden compromised. He must have found that on Hunter Biden's laptops. It's insane. This passes off as news. Remember that. Now, no facts, no reality, no nothing to back it up. Just somebody's claim. And a senator who knows that accountability isn't going to happen because he's read the tea leaves. Now, the hope is, come November, some in his state go, enough of this. And stop with this division and start asking the real question of, when are you going to do something to make people's lives better? When are you going to do something to make the working class a little more prosperous, to give our kids a little bit better opportunity? When are you going to, I don't know, do your job? When are you going to do the things that we need you to do? Stop dividing us. Start dealing with the problems that we have as a society and start moving us forward. That's my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. I'm sure you will find ours. Always there, always available. Like, share, subscribe, make a comment or two. Always like that. Appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. We'll see you back here next time.
been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.